Today, I'll be showing you how to win on Sorare. These steps can honestly be applied across any competition on Sorare, but for me, I'm going to be looking at the Premier League division. It's the league I've had the most success in. It's the league I know the most about. And if you don't know who I am, just promise to drop a thumbs up if you find this helpful, because these are Simply Alex's 6 steps to winning on Sorare. And honestly, I think the first step will surprise you. It's what I call the intuition draft. This step is so easy. You just go onto Sorare as soon as the game week opens up and draft 2 intuitional teams. You just use edit lineup or set lineup and you just pick who you think's the best team. You can use some of the injury news, but you're not researching who's fit and who's not. You might see here some players are injured, because the main objective of this is to just get a lineup out. How many times do people forget things? How many times do more important things happen in life than Sorare? In order to win on Sorare, it doesn't mean you have to finish first in the division. You just need to have a better return than you spent. So to do that, you need to play as many games as possible. But to be honest, as much of a big benefit that is, it goes beyond that, because it tells you your initial structure of how many in-season cards you have, how many out-of-season cards you have. Now, of course, I'm looking at just the in-season Premier League competition, but it works in other ways. It tells you how many available players you can select from. I know from doing this that I don't have many goalkeepers. Alisson's going to be injured. Kelleher's got a tough fixture. Jason Steele's not going to be playing. Verbruggen's my only other option outside of who I picked here, Matt Sells. Now, at the time, I didn't remember Matt Sells is maybe injured, maybe not. That doesn't matter at all. That optimization comes later. That's one of the later steps. The next step is fixtures and form. I think it's chronically overlooked on Sorare because too many people rely on different stats or different websites that tell you how a team's going to play or if they're going to play. But again, this is all about your intuition, how much you know about the league. Because often what I find people do is rely on statistics that don't really, won't map the future and don't really follow any trend that anyone else is in. If you want to be the best and you want to win on Sorare, you can't just do what everyone else is doing, because then you'll need to spend the most money, have the highest collection bonus, all of that. And also, you're going to go into that trend. If you think Man City's going to, get beat heavily by Wolves this week, a Wolves stack will win. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but just running through and understanding, right, any of these upsets that I can see coming that maybe other people don't expect. Yes, it's all, he said, she said, no one really knows. But that's fantasy football at its core. You're trying to beat other people, not get the highest possible score. Yes, they can go hand in hand, but, a 500 doesn't win the next week. It all depends on the week. So as well as that, some of the more basic stuff you're looking for is, okay, of my teams that I have dominant cards or of my players, how are they going to be lined up? So I've just spent £1,000 on Cole Palmer. Away to, Liverpool at Anfield. I know that's tough. I'm looking at Arsenal, I'm thinking, I don't think Bournemouth have been on the best form. I'll go through some of the form, look at Bournemouth and think, yeah, do I agree with that? Do I not? The big one for me here, I don't own any Man City players. They're obviously one of the best 2 teams in the league. They are away to Wolves, who have been horrific for the start of the season. So my early analysis is pretty straightforward. Wolves is going to be absolutely key. If they get smashed or if they score, that's going to completely change the Premier League dynamic. Pretty much the same as Arsenal, Bournemouth, although I think probably Bournemouth's a little bit harder. And then for me, Tottenham, West Ham, that's going to be, pretty key. But now is, it goes beyond just intuition. You're then trying to find, evidence that either backs up or, goes against your own opinion. So you can go through whatever you want for this. I quite like footy stats as a good, league-based thing. So we can see, right, we do know if we filter them by points here, that Wolves are going to be bottom of the league. At the same time, what we're going to be looking for is, goals scored, goals conceded. So, Man City, Chelsea. A lot of this you might already know. You don't need to do it every week. You get a good feeling that, Tottenham score a lot of goals, concede a lot of goals, and away. The more you know about managers and players and your teams, of course, you're going to do better at the game in theory. But yeah, just a quick look of the leagues. And then I like to drill into previous form. And honestly, you could do this for days and days and days. I just like to have a brief understanding of, okay, how do they work? So for example, Wolves are going to be a key game. Why does everyone think that? Well, they got smashed by Brentford, who are worse than Man City. If Brentford can score 5, City can score 8. But a key point here to note, Wolves did score away at Brentford. They did score 3. So if they did that at Man City, Man City haven't been the best defensively. In theory, does that get backed up by goals conceded? Man City fall 8th, 7th in the league. Over 7 games, a goal conceded every game. Something like that. Okay, early start. Then you get Wolves-Liverpool. Now, obviously, I've looked at this before recording, so I've got a bit of an idea. But that's probably going to have more impact than a Brentford game. Because a lot of teams against the big teams, they don't just sit there and say, come on, let's have it. They sit back and defend, unless it's, Burnley under company. But, yeah, that 2-1 would be more beneficial than the sort of like recency bias of, well, Wolves are bottom of the league, Wolves got beat by Brentford, they're not actually that good. Because also you're looking at this, you're like, okay, well they did play Villa. They did play Villa Liverpool. And I know here they've also gone and played Newcastle. So they've had a really tough start to the season. So being bottom of the league, it might be a bit like, okay, they're bottom of the league, but they're not a bottom of the league team. They're not a walkover. The key game, which kind of throws this all into a different dynamic, is Chelsea-Wolves, where they got smashed by Chelsea. So it's that Liverpool game, it's that Chelsea game that I'd be really looking at. But I think the only difference is at the start of the season, and I think most people across football didn't rate Chelsea as this like dominant smasher team. So at home, at Molineux, I could see Wolves having more of a go. I would actually lean, if I had to say like what's the score going to be, I'd actually lean closer to a 2-1 or 3-1 Man City. Let's not forget they haven't been in, electric form either. De Bruyne not going to be there. Rodri not going to be there. That impacts Haaland and his output, who's obviously their star player. So, yeah, as much as I'm looking at Man City Wolves and I'm initially like, where am Man City in the league? Second? Like second versus first? Third versus last? Probably going to absolutely smash them. If you drill into it a little bit more, I'm like, yeah, they might win, but I can see them conceding. So what that's really key for is what I like to call attacking or defending with your selections. Which is actually the step we move back to Sorare, and what I'm talking about is when I'm saying attacking or defending is how good you think your team can be. Are you just trying to stay in the league, or are you trying to actually push up? How high are you going to try and push up that division? So obviously I would say probably City away to Wolves is probably a better fixture than Arsenal to Bournemouth. Now I'm very Arsenal dominant, Ben White, I've got Kai Havertz. So looking at that, I'm thinking, right, I am in a dominant position where I've got second or maybe third best fixture in the league here. So I 100% put in my best team in the top division. When Arsenal played Spurs, I didn't put my best team in my best division. I was playing defensive. I didn't want to get relegated. This Division 1 on Sorare is where the most money is. It's where you're going to get the best returns, like without doubt. You play even like the least players. The only thing that is troublesome about it is that if you get relegated, it's seriously tough to get back up there. And then, you could waste one of your 500-point scores on just getting to that division. So you've not truly sort of like maximized your returns. And that is going to be key. So staying in the division is sometimes as good as winning the division. Kind of. Bit of an exaggeration. But you get the point. If you don't know about them, you can look at the prize pools. You can look at the matches here. You can look how many people are playing. I've not drilled into this too much because it's the same pretty much every week. So I know Division 1 is going to be the best. You're not going to play as many players as you do in Division 3. The key would be you also need to assess this second team. But, which I have done, I guess. In this scenario, Cole Palmer, Ben White, I know he might not play, Porro, Bruno, it's a good but not great team looking at like the sort of fixtures we've got here. And, I do expect Tottenham to win and all of the rest of it. But, yeah. Effectively, I actually don't have, because I didn't have the depth of fixtures to select from before winning the divisions in the Premier League, my best team's actually 4th. So I could, in theory, put something into 4th, but you always want to play up as high the division as you can. So for this week, I'm attacking pretty high up the division, because as much as Man City is probably a slightly better fixture, it's only slightly better. And then you've got to think, well, what teams are you playing? You're going to be playing Arsenal stacks. You're going to be playing, Tottenham stacks. You're going to be playing Chelsea stacks. You're going to be playing Liverpool stacks, Man City stacks. You've got to go out and beat those stacks. Now, I'm actually at a turning point on Sorare where I don't think stacking is the best option. I think it's a lazy option. I think it's going to put you in the most competitive structure because people naturally like to be lazy. That's for why this season I've specifically gone and earned collection bonus on my cards, but I'm not playing them in a stack. If you can get 2 collections for, for the same price, would I have 1 full collection or 2 half collections and mix and match them? Definitely 2 halves. That's the sort of structure that I've been doing. It's probably a strategy video for another day, but the long and short of it is get collection bonus, but don't play them as a collection because everyone likes to be lazy, plays them as a collection, and it's probably not as beneficial as it once was. Step 4 has the coolest name. It's 50% of nothing. If you're mathematically inept, 50% of nothing is still nothing. So effectively, what I'm trying to work out here is how likely they are to play. Now, I do use 2 paid services to help me with that. You absolutely do not need to go out and pay for it. You can use plenty of free sites for it. The only reason I do it is twofold. One, I can actually have like live, conversations with fans, so I get, quicker feedback. And 2, when they're collating information for you, I've got a full-time job. I've got 2 YouTube channels. If someone's going to go out and collate the information and put it all into a nice jazzy screen like they do on Predictify for about £2.50 in my Champion Division subscription, whatever it is, then I'm more than happy to do that. Besides that, I also like supporting the sidelines. They've been so helpful, all of these experts. I'll try and leave the links in the description for those guys because it's really nice that, these are just Sorare fans trying to help out other fans across both sites. And no, that's not a sponsorship, it's just my genuine thoughts. But then I'll go out and I knew Saka was injured during the international breaks. I'm thinking, right, 70%. The best part is a lot of these experts are actually different across both stats. So you can see if I go up to the Arsenal one here, you can see that his lineup and percentages are completely different. So 90% for Saka, for example. He has Timber at 75%. He has White at 50%. All these different changes. It's good to get different perspectives. Towards the end of the game week, Sorare data actually populate their numbers here. And I'm loving this sort of 3 different aspects or 3 different opinions. So Predictify and Discord, I believe they're both like experts, and Sorare data, or the actual Sorare site themselves, they use the top 5 leagues experts as their percentages. I think that's it. That's what I read. So effectively, you're getting 5 opinions of one player here, and you're getting 1 opinion here. And that's really key because they're going to tell you 2 different numbers. If you ask one person, is Saka likely to play? The answer is going to be yes. So on Sorare data, he might be at 90% because he's most likely to play. But on Predictify, you're asking one person. So then you're saying, okay, well, how likely is he to play? So that's why you get those sort of like 90% to plays and, he's a bit of a doubt. Yes, sometimes, Sorare data get it completely wrong because people copy and it's closer to the start of the game week, all that nonsense. But what I'm saying, whatever sites you use, go through your team, see how likely they are to play, and link it back to the last step. Where if you're playing attacking, you're really should be willing to gamble on a 60 or a 70% a bit more, because in theory, if you have a DMP or someone coming off the bench, you shouldn't be getting relegated because your team should be high performing. So yes, you might drop out of, promotion, or you might drop out of somewhere else. Yeah, like I'm talking winning a prize here, but you're dropping down to safe. Whereas if you're, have a defensive team and you're risky, then you're dropping down to relegation, which obviously top division, you want to stay there. Mentioned it all before. So effectively, this is a bit of a guessing game. It's a bit of luck, but it's sort of the best part. You're going to say, is he going to play? Yes or no. It's what makes or breaks you as a fantasy football manager. Then it's time to go back to Sorare and you correct some of these questionable decisions, like Matt Sells, 50% chance of starting at the minute. I'd rather have a 90% slightly worse fixture, Bart Verbruggen. Now these fixtures and these percentages change as we get closer to the deadline. You might need to readjust if you have time and you want to be completely optimal. Same as Ben White, if Timber, for one of the experts, he has him at 75%, I would much rather play him. Off screen, I'll probably look to see if there's any better selections. So up to this point, you're definitely going to have a lineup set. You're going to have included form and fixtures to understand if you want to play attacking or defensively, how high up you're going to push up that division, or if you're going to play defensive. Then moving in, you're going to know fourth, you're going to know how likely your players are to start, which leads us into the fifth step, the most important step. It's what I call average isn't good enough. And I'll explain how that phrase has so many different meanings to Sorare, but just understand that this stage of optimization is what sets you apart from every single manager. This single step really determines how well you're going to do. They're all important, but this is probably the most important step, or maybe it's step 6. But average isn't good enough, right? So when comparing my players here, my big selection, both are very likely to play, is who's going to score better out of Bruno Guimaraes or Cole Palmer. Now, of course, we're going to analyse and optimise every single player if we've got the time. But you've got to understand, as a casual player, you won't have time to every single week run through every single player. You're going to have a lot of that in your head. And when you're making quick, sharp decisions on who should be captain or who should join the team, this is one step I like to do. Filtering by just Chelsea performances, or of course what team he plays for, excluding internationals for example, and whether he's playing home or away. Then drilling down into that, we're looking at some of the key fixtures. It's going to be against hard opposition. Aston Villa 41, Man City 45, Liverpool 35. So his average isn't good enough, because that you look beyond just, oh, his last average is 74, it's 63 here. Also, we're looking across a long time scale. We're not looking at the average of 5 games. It's another way that we're saying average isn't good enough. It's not the last 5 average. It's not the 3-month average. I like a year. I think it's a good sort of, average, essentially. But also, you drill deeper to see, against tough fixtures, how does this player play? The good news is you don't need to do this every single game week. The more you know your players, you'll see how they play. Declan Rice used to score well against every single team last year. He got defensive actions. This year, he's more of an attacking outlet, so therefore he plays better against weaker teams. Bruno Guimaraes, let's look at him, because he is who I currently have in that role, but this is going to be a crucial decision, Palmer or Guimaraes. We're looking at the averages. We're looking against sort of at home, decent fixtures, but maybe not walkover fixtures. Like Southampton should be a lot easier. We're looking at last season, Brighton 69. These sort of averages that you're seeing against harder oppositions at home, he's clear of Palmer. Now, he's also clear in the 64.8 average of across the whole year versus 63.8. That's a good sort of base selection, across the whole year, who would average better. But go that one step further, drill into fixtures, and then go another step further, because average isn't good enough on Sorare. In order to truly maximize, you need to, what I call, swing and a miss, or sometimes swing and home run. You go boom or bust, it's the easier way to say it. Boom scores fly you up that leaderboard. So you're looking how often does he boom or bust? That's probably not a great selection of Palmer. It's probably better when you're comparing same positions. Like, obviously Palmer's an attacking midfielder, and whereas Bruno's more of like a box to box. So Declan Rice is probably a better comparison if you're thinking, maybe we play Palmer and Guimaraes, do I bring in Rice, or do I drop Rice, sorry. So you're doing the same analysis as before. This time it's going to be like a slightly weaker opposition. So you're thinking, probably like a Brighton, probably a bit lower, maybe Wolves, 71. You're keeping into consideration how often he gets, decisive actions, because that's going to boom or bust your score naturally. But what we're really looking at is also how often he's hitting these dark greens, because those dark greens are what fly you up and boom you or bust you out of those divisions. You're really looking to, if you have the best players in the game, how likely are they to actually hit the best score? And I'll be the first to admit, I've overcomplicated this multiple times during the season, where, Rice is more likely to get 100 than Saka if he scores a goal, and the percentages, you can overcomplicate it. Sometimes simple is better. So don't, sit at your computer spending hours. Do some intuition, do some stats at the same time. It's the best of both worlds, really. That will make the best Sorare manager. But in this scenario, I'm actually liking the look of Bruno Guimaraes, not over Rice, but over Palmer. I think Rice puts up some very solid hundreds. He's got a slightly easier fixture. But when you're comparing home versus away, obviously we are looking at that. So 60.5 versus 64.8 would lead you to Guimaraes But when I'm then looking at how likely is someone to get 100, which Rice is an easier fixture, remember, I am leaning towards Rice. Thankfully, it's a very tight decision there. I am not having to captain either of them because I have Saka, who away from home averages 64.3, which surprisingly is actually less than Guimaraes. So you do need to think then, okay, if average isn't good enough, who's more likely to hit the hundreds for a captaincy? We're talking here strictly captaincy now. It's going to be Saka. These dark greens, you're looking at 5 versus 4. Form as well should be considered. Not too much emphasis on form, but the way Saka's playing. The only thing that might make me not captain Saka is the fact that he's 70%. But I think Kamara has also picked up an injury for Brazil, so he's about 80. I'll see with the main Manhattan and Newcastle expert. So overall, that's a good start. You can go through all of your teams. Christian Romero, don't forget, he could grab the captaincy. He less likely to put up 100 scores. Keep in mind how many fixtures he played across the last year. He'll have certain fixtures, maybe Pedro Porro, that doesn't have many. Certain people will be injured. But what I'm trying to say there is effectively, average isn't enough. Look for your best performing cards. Take into consideration how that card plays against fixtures. Split them up, top class teams, bottom class team, or like bottom half teams, and the worst teams. That gives you a really good synopsis, a really good expectation of how the player will score. Pedro Porro will probably be a perfect example who booms or busts. Like if I think, Man City, he's put up a 0. Now he did put up a good score against Arsenal, but it was away from home. It was at home for him. But effectively, I bet if we flick to away, he'd have worse results. It's only, 3 points. It is quite significant over a year average, but if you then look at harder fixtures, you're looking at 34s, 47s, 29s, then the easier fixtures, he puts up 91s. It's very easy for wing-backs to identify against weaker oppositions. They're more likely to score decisive actions. It gets a little more complicated in midfielders. You've got to understand where they play in midfielders. Same for wingers. What sort of winger are they? Do they take on people? Do they play quite, I'd call boring football where they just pass it back and all the rest of it? The only part I haven't touched on is goalkeepers. Goalkeepers are simultaneously the hardest and the easiest to choose between because getting a clean sheet is effectively make or break for a goalkeeper. If they keep a clean sheet, 9 times out of 10, they're going to outscore a goalkeeper that doesn't keep a clean sheet. But you also do have to consider that boom or bust element. So I'm going to do what I always do, which is sort of like a cheat sheet. It's used the bookies, the bookmakers odds. Just on screen, I'm looking at both teams to score. Obviously, you can drill in and see how likely a team is to actually keep a clean sheet. I like decimal odds. It keeps it really simple. But effectively, once you've drilled through that, you know who's most likely to keep a clean sheet. But why it's so hard is because if you want to be very, very first, you might need to go against the grain and not pick the easiest clean sheet. Because the easiest clean sheet, like if you look at David Raya recently, for example, if it doesn't happen, then you're going to end up with, say, Southampton 39, because he's not going to have those defensive attributes in terms of saves to actually keep points accruing. Whereas if we look at someone like Vicario before, say, Brighton scored 3 against him, then you're looking at, even when he concedes, he's putting up 62s. So this is why I really prefer a player like Vicario for the cost. Now, obviously, if costs were all equal, I'd take Raya. He's going to outscore him on average. But when you look at it game week by game week and you can select, right, I don't want to play Vicario here, I want to play Vicario here, then you can start looking and saying, okay, well, yes, when I won, I might have got lucky that Man United, had a red card and Spurs didn't keep they did keep a clean sheet, sorry. But even if they had conceded, he would have got a better score than, say, David Raya when he conceded. It's all a bit of luck. And that is the final step. To win on Sorare, you of course need luck. It's part of the game. That's it for me today. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe. All the best to you. Cheers.